real center of power in Iran was not the palace where the Shah lived, but the U.S. Embassy. It was the U.S. Embassy that was directing policy. It led to protests, okay? So the first protest was in 1999. You had 50,000 students protesting the lack of democracy in Iran. What they were really protesting, of course, was the corruption of the Revolutionary Guard Corps. But you couldn't do that. You can't say that. So they were protesting for democracy. They were crushed. Then in 2009 to 2010, there's something called the Green Movement. And the idea of the Green Movement was that people wanted a new government that promised reform. And in election, their candidate, the reform candidate, lost. And people suspected that the Revolutionary Guard Corps cheated. And so there were violent protests. And again, the Revolutionary Guard suppressed the revolution. And at that point, basically, people lost faith in democracy. And so afterwards, every other president was basically a puppet of the regime. Okay? And the most recent protest that in 2023, there was a young woman named Mahsa Amini, and she was arrested by the police for failing to wear head covering in public. And she died in custody. Okay? So people suspect that she was beaten by the police. And this caused massive protests across the country. Okay? So for the past 10, 20 years, there have been continuous protests in Iran about the government and the economy, but mainly about the fact that the Revolutionary Guard Corps has monopolized the economy to its own benefit, which has caused the economy to stagnate and for people to become poorer over time. But because the protests are so widespread, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, ironically, has become more powerful because they are seen as the most loyal to the current regime, okay? Their loyalty is not contested. And so what this means is this. What this means is that if there's a change in leadership, okay? If the Ayatollah dies and a new Ayatollah comes into power, what the new Ayatollah will do is reduce the power of the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Does that make sense to you guys? Because he needs to establish his own power base. And the Revolutionary Guard Corps was loyal to the current, the Revolutionary Guard Corps is most loyal to the current leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. But if there's a new Ayatollah who comes to power, he needs to establish his own power base. So he'll bring his people into power. And that means reducing the power of the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Okay? Does that make sense? And so there will be a direct threat to the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Now, if the current leader's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, were to become the new Ayatollah, then things would stay the same. And the Revolutionary Guard Corps would continue to control the economy. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? All right? So again, I'm presenting a reason why the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps would want to kill the current president and ensure that the Ayatollah's son becomes the next leader. Because they want to maintain the monopoly of power over the country. Does that make sense to you guys? All right? Now, I now want to discuss who these people are and how they think about the world, okay? Because they're corrupt, but they're ultimately religious fanatics that want to export the revolution across the Middle East. Okay? So let's talk about 1979. In 1979, the Shah left Iran because there were so many protests against him. The Shah realized that it was very hard for him to stay in power despite the brutality of the army and the police. There were just too many protests, too many people who wanted to see him gone. Okay? So he goes to America. And there are many Iranians who are outraged by this for two reasons. The first reason is that they want the Shah, the king of Iran, to stand trial for all his human rights crimes while he was king of Iran. Okay? That's the first reason. But the second reason is they were afraid that the Shah had gone to America to win America's support for an invasion of the country. The Shah was trying to get America to invade Iran and put him back in power, which happened in 1953. Okay? And so to counter the threat of the Shah, in November of 1979, 300 to 500 students, college students, stormed the U.S. Embassy and took it over and held 53 Americans as hostages. Okay? And they demanded the Shah be returned to Iran to stand trial. Now, this is obviously an invasion of American territory. This goes against international law. But when the students did this, there was so much public support for the students that the authorities didn't really do anything. Also, the Ayatollah Khomeini support the students. Okay? So there was widespread public support for the students. When the students invaded the embassy, the first thing that diplomats must do is basically destroy all the files, right? All the secrets. So all embassies come with some things called shredders. Do you guys know what shredders are? Okay? Shredders are just basically machines, and if you want to destroy paperwork very quickly, you put it in the machine. And the machine will cut the paper into about 100 different strips of paper, okay? And this is the fastest, most effective way to destroy your documents. And there are about like tens of thousands of pages. Can you guess what the students did? Over months, the students slowly and methodically piece the documents back together one by one. And what these documents revealed to the students and to the public in Iran is that the real center of power in Iran was not the palace where the Shah lived, but the U.S. Embassy. It was the U.S. Embassy that was directing policy in Iran. It was the U.S. Embassy that was responsible for the brutality of the regime. And it was the U.S. Embassy that in 1953 staged a coup d'etat against the democratically elected government of Iran and installed the police state of the Shah. Okay? So these students, when they read these documents, were really angry. Okay? And you can imagine that these students, because they piece together these documents, right? They're fanatics. And guess what, guys? These students have gone on to become the top military leaders of the country. Okay? And I'll just give you three names. Hussein Dagan, who was the Minister of Defense from 2013 to 2017. Okay? He was a student protester in the U.S. Embassy. That's one person. Second person is Mohammad Ali Jafari, who from 2007 to 2019 was head of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, okay? And also Mohammad Bagheri, who is still the chief of staff of the Iranian army. So the Revolutionary Guard Corps are staffed by individuals who hate America and see America as the great Satan. And they basically want to go to war with America to avenge the wrongs and evils that America did to Iran. Okay, does that make sense?